Welcome back to The Blind Perspective. Today, we're going to talk about some of the struggles that being legally blind can have here at home. Being legally blind causes a lot of need for help, and that's not terribly difficult for me. I have a lot of friends around who are willing to come and help me. However, when I'm at home, I live alone. So I have to either get somebody to come over and help me, or I find other ways of getting things done. There are still times where I still need somebody to come over and help me. One such occasion was a time when my glasses had gone missing. And I was like, I cannot find them. I looked and I looked and I looked. These are regular eyeglasses. These were not sunglasses. And I could not find them anywhere. It'd been about a week. I had looked. So my friend came over and she's helping me look. And we looked and we looked. Still could not find them. And I'm thinking, okay, good. At least it's not because I'm blind. She can see and she can't find them. So clearly this is not because I'm blind. Well, we give up. So before leaving, after giving up searching, she goes in the bathroom and within 5 seconds, she says, do you know there's a pair of glasses in here sitting on top of this ledge? And I was like, no. Sure enough, there they were. The glasses I had been looking for were sitting in plain sight in the bathroom the whole time. That is just one of many times that I've had to call a friend and say, hey, can you come help me find this, that, or the other? So one other thing when it comes to having company over, I have on more than one occasion called people up after having been at my house and been like, hey, you don't happen to know where my TV remote is? And they'll be like, yeah, I put it on top of your TV. I mean, that makes sense, right? Well, I don't put my TV remote there. And so therefore I didn't think to look there. And so I had to kind of establish, okay, it's no big deal if you move it. Just let me know because otherwise I'm never going to find it. So I'm just going to show you a few things that I do around the house that probably a little bit different than most people, but it's kind of how I've come to find to be successful at getting things done. So to start off with, vacuuming the floor. Okay, for most people, they turn the lights on and they start vacuuming. For me, I actually turn the lights off to vacuum. And that is because the light on the vacuum is bright enough that it's actually easier to see the stuff if there's no other lights on. Now, I'm not saying it's a completely dark room, but I don't have a bunch of lights on. And it is actually easier for me to see where the stuff is and that I've gotten it. I also vacuum barefoot because then I can feel if I've missed something. Speaking of feeling when cleaning, when I go to wipe a surface, even washing dishes, wiping a table, I will wipe the table and then feel just to make sure that I've gotten things. So the kitchen is another place that I need to kind of find ways around being visually impaired. So one of those is the stove. So my stove is not a digital stove. Digital stoves are a little bit easier because usually the display is a little bit bigger. Generally speaking, I still have challenges with those. But one of my biggest tactics, kind of like with shopping, is I memorize things. So for instance, when looking at my stove, I know that if I had to set my oven to 350 degrees, I can take this and all I have to do is turn it completely 180 degrees. And that at least gets me to close to 350. And then if I need to adjust beyond that, I can kind of lean forward and look and see what the temperature is. But I know that that gets me pretty close to where I need to be. And it's kind of nice because 350 is one of the more common temperatures things need to be set at. Now, the other thing is which burner it goes to which knob. This is difficult for keeping track of things. We have this picture here indicates which dot it is. I can kind of see that, but not really. So I have just learned that this is the one for this, and this is the one for this. And truthfully, those are the only two burners I use. It might not be that I only use those two, but those are the two I use the most because they're in the front. So I just know it's the two knobs on the outside end, and I go from there. So hair tools is another thing that can be a little difficult when you can't see well. And what I mean by hair tools is things like flat irons, curling irons, things like that. They're a little dangerous because if you don't know where to be touching them, you can burn yourself. What I do is I have learned where the buttons are, and that takes the first handful of times using it. I start learning, okay, here's the power button, here's the temperature up and down button, and here's, I'm gonna be honest, I don't actually know what this button up here does because I never use it. But after using it for a few times, I start to remember, and I don't even have to look at it. What I have learned is I can push the power button. It's the very first button, and I know this end is safe to touch, but it's the very first button. I also know that it automatically turns the temperature on to 360 degrees. So the very next button after the power button is the temperature down button. Each time you push it, it goes down 10 degrees. So I know that I can turn it on and get the temperature down to 320 degrees by pushing the power and then pushing this button 4 times without looking at it. So I usually do it with my thumb. So turns on, and then I feel up. I push it 4 times. I think I just held this upside down for you. 320 degrees. And I didn't even have to look at any of the buttons. Now I also know that that same button turns it back off. And it's nice because this screen is lit when it's on. And that way, when I set it back down, I mentally just check, I look, and I see whether it's on. And that way I don't leave my flat iron on when I leave the room. So one other thing I struggle with is the remotes. I can't read all of the little labels on here, but what I tend to do is I learn specific buttons, the buttons I really need. The power button, the volume, the channel buttons, and then like your navigation buttons. So that's kind of the only thing I usually learn on remotes because that's kind of what I use most often. So if I need to use a different button, I will get a magnifying glass or take a picture of a remote with my phone so I can zoom in and learn what it is. Thankfully, there's distinguished shapes. So for instance, if I'm holding this in my finger, I just hold it and I can feel where the volume and the channel, I can feel where these navigation buttons are. So that makes it very easy. So something that I own that I have never had since I've lived on my own is a clock on my wall. I've never done that before. And that is because being legally blind, I can't read wall clocks. This one I can actually kind of read if I'm close like this because the numbers are big. It's kind of funny because back when I first moved out on my own, that was kind of before smartphones. Yes, I'm aging myself a little bit, but you had cell phones, but you didn't necessarily check your phone for the clock the way that we do now. If you had a wristwatch, you would use that, but most of the time you would just use a clock that's hanging on the wall because most places had them. But when people came over to my house, I didn't have them, and they would be like, why are there no clocks? I can't tell what time it is. And I'm like, why have a clock? I can't read them. So as you can see, there are a lot of challenges that come when being legally blind and you live alone. But over the years, I've kind of developed a lot of these things and come to find ways of kind of working around that. So I hope that this has been helpful for any of you who maybe struggle with visual impairment, give you some ideas of what you can also do to kind of still do the things you need to get done. If you have any other ideas or any other things that you use at home, or if you have any questions about things that maybe I haven't shown how I do things, go ahead and leave them down in the comments below. And stay tuned for more Blind Perspective.